AM radio station. Arbitron rating Spring 93.
Hey, Diamond!
All right. As I promised, we're going to have C. Vernon Mason on WABC now, who's taken over, apparently, from Messrs. Michael Nassater and Robert Shapiro as the attorney for Vince Coleman. As you know, Vince Coleman has been charged in California with possession of firearms, unlawful possession of an explosive device. And as his former attorneys said, that he was guilty, but it was an accident. They said it was a stupid thing to do, but it was an accident. They admit that he did it. But apparently there's been a change in legal strategy, and are we ready? Can I do this now? All right, and I'm going to consult C. Vernon Mason. I know that you and I have had our differences in the past, Mr. Mason. You have been with me on the radio before, but we've gotten along in a friendly fashion. Tell me why you have come into this case.
Well, Mr. Diamond, it turned out that Vince Coleman was being framed. He was being set up for failure and for conviction by the New York Mets and by the Lords of Baseball. And he asked me to take over for his defense. Now, we will prove in open court, Mr. Diamond, that contrary to what the Los Angeles Police Department says, Vince Coleman was provoked by a crowd consisting of known drug dealers, police undercover agents, and members of the Hasidic community wearing Mets caps, to defending himself by throwing back at the crowd a lit firecracker, a lit explosive device that was initially hurled in his direction by this vicious crowd intent on framing him.
Now, wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me, C. Vernon Mason, that Vince Coleman is completely innocent and that this attack originated in the crowd of people whom we have thought up till now were the victims?
That is quite correct, Mr. Diamond. We will prove in open court that members of the Crown Heights community were prominent in that crowd of people who initiated this disturbance, and that the explosive device originated from the crowd of, as I say, police undercover agents, members of the Crown Heights Hasidic community disguised as Met fans, and known drug dealers. What happened was the fireworks were hurled in the direction of the car containing Vince Coleman and the other players, and in a frantic effort to save himself by diverting the explosive device, he caught it with the reflexes of a trained athlete and returned the explosive device to the vicious crowd from which it emanated.
Now, Mr. Mason, what about the little girls, the little girl, the 18-month-old child who was injured in this incident, as well as the boy who had obvious wounds?
Mr. Diamond, we will prove that these children were in fact victims of child abuse. The father of the girl and both parents of the boy had inflicted these wounds at home prior to the game between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Mets, Mr. Diamond, and the incident was a cover-up action to deflect attention away from the parents who had abused their own children and to Vince Coleman. In fact, the children were persuaded to go along with the attack, and I will insist that a special prosecutor be appointed to prosecute all the people in the crowd who originated the attack on Vince Coleman and the other two players.
Wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me that you want to indict the members of the crowd? What about the children who are in the crowd?
Mr. Diamond, I will insist that the entire crowd be indicted, because to do otherwise would show preferential treatment to the Hasidic community in the crowd disguised as Met fans. As for the children, Mr. Diamond, their presence in the crowd means that they are involved in this just because they sustained wounds due to the abusive behavior of their parents at home does not exculpate them from responsibility in this crime. And I will insist, and the entire community will insist, that the children in the crowd be charged as adults in the crime of trying to hurt Vince Coleman and the ball players.
Now, wait a minute. You are still insisting that the attack initiated from the crowd? I mean, there were innocent people in that crowd. What about the other attorneys who started the case? What about the New York Mets? Their position from the beginning has been that Vince Coleman made a terrible, stupid, foolish mistake, but that he did it.
Well, that is their position, Mr. Diamond, because they were willing to sacrifice the interests of my client, Mr. Coleman, in the interest of satisfying the racism inherent in organized baseball and in the community. But I am representing the true best interest of my client and the true circumstances of the crime committed by the crowd of undercover agents, Hasidic Jews disguised as Met fans, and known drug dealers. And by the way, Mr. Diamond, there were two women in the crowd who had made sexual advances on Mr. Coleman, and the firecrackers were merely a part of rough sex.
Now, wait a minute. You're telling me that the firecrackers, in addition to being defensive, were merely a function of rough sex?
Well, that is true. My client was the victim of sexual harassment on the part of these two women in the crowd, Mr. Diamond, and they had initiated the sexual activity, which in a number of occasions, incidents prior to this attack, culminated in the use of firecrackers to achieve multiple orgasms.
Oh, my heaven. I don't know really how to pursue this anymore, but let me just ask you, you expect to go into a court of law and prove that Vince Coleman was being set up by undercover police, Hasidic Jews dressed as Met fans, and known drug dealers, and two women who used firecrackers for rough sex, and you expect to prove that in court?
Well, I agree with you, Mr. Diamond, that this will be highly difficult in the racially charged atmosphere of Los Angeles. That is why we are asking for a change of venue, because it is obvious that in the current atmosphere of racism in Los Angeles, as evidenced by the unjustified prosecution of Mr. Williams and Mr. Watson in the Denny trial, that my client cannot receive an impartial trial. Therefore, I am insisting that we move the trial to Junior's Restaurant, where fairness, pardon me, Mr. where Mr. Diamond, excuse me, where Junior's Restaurant, where fairness will prevail, and where the Lemrick Nelson jury held its welcome home party for Lemrick Nelson. And in that, we feel we can achieve a fair trial. By the way, my client did not throw the firecracker. It is a clear case of mistaken identity, which a fairly constituted jury will clearly establish.
But you just said that it was in self-defense, and that the crowd threw the firecrackers at him, trying to kill him, and now you say it's mistaken identity.
Well, Well, either one. You take your pick. We haven't as yet decided, but certainly one or the other will be a sufficient defense since they're both good. Now, Mr. Diamond, there's a double standard with respect to the prosecution of Vince Coleman, and for that reason, I insist on the appointment of a special prosecutor to prosecute every man, woman, and child in the crowd from which the explosives originate and to which they were returned by my client strictly in self-defense. For that reason, I am therefore directing my client not to cooperate with any law enforcement officials pending the appointment of a special prosecutor acceptable to the community.
Well, that's no surprise to me. That seems to be the standard rule of thumb for you activists, to order your client not to cooperate. And by the way, C. Vernon Mason, what is the double standard to which you refer when you insist on the appointment of a special prosecutor? What is that double standard?
Well, Mr. Diamond, there was a crowd of 25 people from whence the explosives were hurled at my client to do him great bodily damage, if not to kill him. And not one of the people in that crowd have yet been indicted, while my client has been indicted.
Wait a minute. You want the people in the crowd to be indicted, including the children in the crowd who were injured?
I will insist, Mr. Diamond, that the children be charged as adults. Furthermore, we are organizing a demonstration of community outrage over the unjustified racist prosecution of my exploited client. Reverend Sharpton will shut down every baseball park, Mr. Diamond, in America and Canada and Mexico and Japan and Cuba to protest this injustice.
Yeah, I suppose they're going to be shouting, "No justice, no peace, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace."
Well, not exactly. That cry will be modified, Mr. Diamond, to read, "No peace for no crackers."
No peace for no crackers?
Now you got it, Jackson. Mr. Diamond, I will tell you that the crowd consisted of undercover police officers on the take who deliberately started the event to frame my client and to bring disgrace on the community because he had evidence of police corruption.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that Vince Coleman had evidence of police corruption, so undercover police and Hasidic Jews disguised as Mets fans started this whole thing to frame him up?
That is correct, Mr. Diamond. In a vain effort to discredit the evidence that my client will provide to the courtroom, I will tell you that we have evidence of police corruption, and that is why the crowd has been granted preferential treatment and not one member has been arrested. So I will say to you, Mr. Diamond, in conclusion, no peace for no crackers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, C. Vernon Mason. I can't believe it, but this is Jay Diamond on WABC. Okay, the numbers from New Jersey, 201-489 WABC, Connecticut, New York, 212-563 WABC. Hello, David. Hi.
Good evening, Mr. Diamond. I have 2 points, really. Number one, this evening I heard Vince Coleman on a different radio station admit his guilt. He said it was a stupid act and childlike whatever. And number two, and I think this is the main thing, that was not C. Vernon Mason on the phone. That was you mimicking him.
I beg your pardon?
And I can prove it to you. You never spoke at the same time he was speaking.
You are a very suspicious man. You know that?
No, you mimic people very good, and you play shtick sometimes. There's some shtick tonight you're playing. Nothing wrong with that.
All right, I'm glad you give me your approval, but that was a true interview.
Why did you put him on the phone?
What is this? What are you? I'm asking the questions here. In case you don't realize it, it's my show. You answer the questions, and I ask them.
Fine. So what's your question?
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the call. From Jersey, 201-489-WABC. Connecticut, New York, 212-563. WABC. Kenny, this is Jay Diamond. Hi.
Yeah, Jay, that was very clever. Very clever. First of all, Jay, that wasn't C. Vernon Mason, number one. Number two, I hope he sues you, takes your pants off. You know?
He can't sue
that
me.
That was really silly on your part, Jay. You know what you're doing to New York? You're going to make this a hotbed of racism.
Why, you can't take a little joke?
Well, you know, Jay, that was a bad joke.
Why? What was so bad about it?
Why did you have to...
Well, you know, I love these people. Wait, I'll let you talk.
Why did you have to bring in the Hasidim Jews dressed with baseball caps, okay? Why did you have to go into the thing with Al Sharpton? Why did you have to go into all these... Was this necessary? Is this the only kind of a joke that you can think of?
I thought it was funny.
Do you think this is a real joke?
Yeah, to me it's entertaining. Why do you get so inflamed about it?
I'm not inflamed, Jay.
No, you're upset with me.
Oh, no, I'm not inflamed.
Why? Why are you angry? Are you... No, you know, I have a...
I am not angry.
All right, let me say goodnight to you. See, the guy won't let me talk at all. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, why this piece of nothing, why this cockroach, Kenny, who I should have sprayed, let me tell you why he's angry. He's angry because it hit home. It hit home. Yes, it was me. It wasn't really Seaver. These geniuses call up and they think they're going to get me. Oh, Jay, we know it wasn't C. Vernon Mason. Of course it wasn't C. Vernon Mason. Silly. But it was illustrative of some of the tactics and techniques and lies that C. Vernon Mason has propagated on the public in the past. Specifically in the Tawana Brawley shenanigans. That total lie. And the reason why Kenny doesn't like it is because I think it was a pretty effective satire on the techniques and tactics of C. Vernon Mason and activists in general, who lie, and make so many distortions and then prohibit their charges, their clients, from cooperating with the authorities, demand the special prosecutor, and make up all kinds of crap stories that, it has to do with corruption and turn facts around 180 degrees. It's not beneath these activists to say that the firecrackers didn't come from C. Vernon Mason. They came from the crowd, and there's preferential treatment. Not one member of that crowd has been arrested. But this guy, Kenny, couldn't stand that, because effective satire is a much more painful blow than name-calling. And that's why this Kenny, who just called me, is now on the ground with his back to the floor and his legs twitching upwards to the ceiling. Steve, this is Jay Diamond. Hi.
Doing, Jay?
Yeah, hi.
I just called. I thought that was very good.
I'm glad you liked it.
I can't wait to go to Japan and see Al Sharpton closing out all the games.
Yeah, no peace for no crackers.
No crackers. That was very good.
All right,
I called to defend you.
No, I'm glad you did. I appreciate it. I'm glad somebody got a kick out of it.
There's no sense of humor anymore.
Nothing at all.
No, it's like one hand the politicians will tell you that to enjoy the beautiful mosaic.
Well,
on the other hand, you're supposed to ignore it. But how are you supposed to enjoy it if you can't laugh at yourself?
Although the point of satire, I suppose, is to arouse people, and so I think it was very effective.
No, it was very funny.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks. I appreciate the endorsement. Nice to know somebody enjoyed it. By the way, what's wrong with having a laugh now and then at our own expense? I've made fun of myself. But this guy, Kenny, just got mad because I picked on his hero, C. Vernon Mason. By the way, I got news for you. It doesn't make me a racist. It just makes me a person who exposes BS. That's all it does. Randy, this is Jay Diamond on WABC. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Diamond.
How do you do?
Hi, I've never called before, but I have been listening to you recently. And I just want to say thank you for exposing that real menace to society, namely Hasidim in Mets caps.
Yeah.
Because I think they've been out there way too long. And I think someone has to expose them, and you're the one to do it. And I think that if people didn't quite get that, you were not making fun of Vince Coleman. You were not saying he did these things. You were trying to show what would happen if someone like Mason got a hold of this.
That's right.
Was given the opportunity, he would run with it.
That's exactly right. And how they can make something out of any nothing.
Well, I want to say that every member of my family has been, in my immediate family, has been a victim of crime by people who were not of our color. And we didn't see it as racism. We saw it as crime victims. But we could have certainly screamed racism. My brother was 13 and held up with a gun to his head on the way home from school. And my brother is white, and the guy, well, two of them, they were black. And we never screamed racism. We just said, isn't it a shame that you can't wear a leather jacket in the street?
Let me tell you something. What I did was the least racist thing anyone in the world could have done, because it was in jest and it was humorous, and it really wasn't vindictive or vicious. It wasn't name-calling. There were no derisive comments. It was just having a little fun. And if I'm allowed to make fun of Mario Cuomo, if I'm allowed to make fun of Bill Clinton, why aren't I allowed to make fun of C. Vernon Mason? And by the way, to that dope, to that nerd Kenny who called up, Mason can't sue me because he's a public figure. And if Kenny consults the law, it's very difficult for a public figure to sue anybody for slander.
Well, I don't think that someone like Mason should be allowed to, well, he's allowed to, of course, we're allowed to say whatever we want, but he just says things that are blatant lies. If he had a case like this, it would become, every other word would become blatant lies. And one thing that I have disagreed with a lot of things you've said in the past, but since I've listened to you, but something that I really agree with you on is that you really called people on it when you've caught them in lies. I noticed that a lot of people will call up and whatever you're saying, they'll suddenly make up a story to conform to that, and you say, that never happened.
Yeah,
I know that didn't. You're lying. You're making it up.
Right.
And in real life, you hear people do this to you all the time. Like, you're saying something, and they say, you know, that happened to me, and they make up this whole convoluted story. And you never really have the guts to call them on it. You wouldn't. But I think it's good that you call them on it.
Well, because that's what I tried to say in the beginning when I got confused by the loud television in the newsroom, which is that we have lost our critical faculties, Randy, because we're so accustomed to hearing mantras repeated to us and then repeating them back, and a big lie becomes accepted wisdom, and unbelievably, astonishingly, the big lie becomes accepted wisdom, and then that lie becomes the foundation for imbecilic public policy, and a nation of 270 million people becomes slaves to a lie.
And those people who perpetrate it, like Sharp and Mason with Tawana Brawley, they've never come forward and even had the guts to say, we were a hoax too. They will go to their grave saying there's a kernel of truth in there, and that kernel of truth should be defended. They will never come forward with it.
Thank you.
They would have credibility if they did.
I appreciate your call. Got to go to Road Watch America. I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Bye-bye.
Right back on WABC. I'm back. This is Jay Diamond on WABC from New Jersey 201. 489 WABC, Connecticut, New York, 212-563 WABC. Hello, Frank.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. First time I've called you.
Thank you.
I appreciated your satire. I think that it's really, as you say, the most poignant form of elucidating or enlightening and shedding light on issues. It's much more memorable too. You really can remember that kind of stuff. And when you exaggerate like crazy with satire, it shows often, how ridiculous things are stretched. Often, I called up Lisa and Curtis about a week ago when they had the lawyer on who's defending some of the Trade Center bombers. And I mentioned to him, I can't remember his name, Kunstler's partner, Kuby or something like that.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Ronald Kuby.
Yeah. And I mentioned, they asked, I forget what the question they were asking was, but I said, well, what he's going to do is he's going to prove that the Trade Center bombing actually didn't happen. It was really, it's a question, it's mass hysteria that was perpetrated by the FBI. And all those people you saw coming out of the building with the smoke, soot on their face, those were all FBI agents, you see. And it was just this, it was his hysteria that was caused by the FBI. To indict these people who are actually the kindest people, and they wouldn't hurt a fly.
They're international humanitarians.
They
go from country to country dispensing good works.
They make Mother Teresa look like Mean Joe Green, these guys. I mean, and this guy, and the whole thing was it's a setup, obviously. It's an obvious setup by the FBI, who always do this kind of thing, and they're just pulling the wool over our eyes. So, that kind of thing really shows, and what you do and what you did tonight really shows the insane crap that you hear so often by especially lawyers, often politicians, but lawyers when they're defending a case in an outrageous way like that.
That when repeated often enough, has somehow the ring of truth, and then, sadly, is the foundation of public policy. That's how sick our civilization is. People, I of course, in impersonating C. Vernon Mason, I just made up crazy stories. But the stories were true. They shared verisimilitude with the real stuff that he makes up.
Exactly.
And so it pointed out how absurd his own tall tales are with respect to Brawley and so many of the other cases.
Yeah, and if you just...
But what's frightening is that if you they scream, the activists scream this nonsense over and over again, people believe it, and we forge public policy based on this.
You're right. I mean, it is kind of Orwellian to hear really crazy stuff repeated, more and more outrageous stuff. And I guess, like you say, the more it's repeated, the more people accept more and more outrageous and crazy and insane and illogical and irrational as truth.
And Randy made a good point, that young woman who called, that if Vince Coleman would lend himself to this effort, they would be happy to step in and start screaming for a special prosecutor and refusing to allow him to cooperate and demanding parity with respect to arresting people in the crowd, including the little children. And the stories about the way I made up that those children that were injured by their parents. It was child abuse. But that, as crazy as that is, it's the stuff that he would say.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff they say and outright lies constantly. I remember,
Thank you. Frank, go ahead, quickly.
I just remember when Kunstler was on defending the savages who were savaged the jogger, and he was talking in the radio and said they didn't have any weapons. And I called up that, and I said, what are you talking? What are sharpened screwdrivers used? What do they use them as, toothpicks?
Yeah, I know.
What are sharpened screwdrivers? Those aren't... I mean, it's lies and insanity constantly.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Ed, this is Jay Diamond. How do you do?
Jay, how are you?
Good.
I just wanted to tell you I enjoyed your satire, and I actually got it. It was pretty funny, and you didn't lie. Everything was kind of taken from actual events. I just thought you should have maybe changed the name from C. Vernon Mason to C. Vermin Mason. And, well, he is a louse, so I thought that might fit. I don't know.
Next time.
All right. Randy was right on target, too. And Kenny was only upset because he didn't get it until you were almost done. That's what, that's what happened. Just like I didn't get your, when you were doing that Ed McMahon. I actually thought that was him a couple weeks ago when you were doing Bob's show.
That was Ed McMahon.
No, you're better than I thought.
Will you stop it? It was Ed McMahon.
All right.
Don't be... You're kidding around.
Yes, I am. I got to go, Jay.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thomas, Jay Diamond here. Hi.
Yeah, how you doing, Jay?
Good.
I thought what you did was very funny. I'm a black man. I think that you were stepping on one of my heroes, but didn't bother because I could take a joke.
See, that's the spirit.
But
you understand.
I'm more offended at what you were saying at the top of the show, because when you talk, you use a lot of bywords, and...
No, I don't.
Well, in a way
you tell me what they were.
Well, when you were talking about violence, and you and another black man was talking. You were talking about violence and
Ben called.
No parents and stuff like that. But you always talk about it in a way that it's insinuated that only blacks have broken homes. Only black kids are out there causing violence.
Well, no. Well, you're not. Wait, let me tell you what I think. And you're mistaken.
Well,
that's not what I meant to indicate, and I never do. But let me tell you what I do want to indicate. I do think that radical elements, radical activists, take the reality of bad homes and bad parents, and the natural suffering that they inflict on their children, and they use that anger in the children, that the children have, that natural anger, the well-deserved anger of the children toward abusive parents, and they propagandize those children. They feed them lies that the anger they feel is not toward the parents, but toward society, which has somehow wronged them. And they encourage them in their worst motives.
You know, Jay...
That's what I mean to imply.
I'd like to say something. I was raised on welfare since I was 7. And my father was shot in the head in World War II, and he went crazy, if you know what I mean. And so we had a broken home. And so I was on relief at 7, and I think from my experience, I know that black children, if they watch things in earnest, they don't need anybody to make them mad because they get mad at their own. Because I can remember going to Christmas parties that the state throws, and
yeah, but you see,
let me give you a couple examples, and you'll see what I mean. I remember going.
No, but it's important for me that you understand that you were mistaken. I honestly don't want to make the implication that only blacks come from broken homes, because it's not true. That's not. But I do think that there are radical activists who are manipulating that very sad reality of broken homes to get young black children to hate the world.
Yeah, but
now that let me tell you. Listen to me. Listen. That does not mean that I have it in for blacks. I don't.
I don't think you do. But listen what I'm saying. I mean, not about that. I think, and sometimes.
Why can't I condemn the activists who I think are manipulating children to destroy themselves?
Because
what is wrong? How is that anti-black?
Because I think that people are smarter than that. I think that if when Farrakhan stands up and says something, or Sharpton, I listen to what they say. If it makes sense, I agree. If it don't, I disagree. I mean, nobody can stand up in front of me.
No, but you're a grown man.
Yeah, but
how old are you?
I'm 41.
All right, you're 41. I'm talking about an 8-year-old child who listens to an activist telling him that inner anger he feels that psychologically is really directed at the mother and father who failed him is really directed toward the world.
Well, I think kids that are 8 years old are apolitical. They're not
true.
I think most black kids who are young in the inner cities are worrying about eating.
Now, about what?
Eating.
All right, now listen to me. Listen to me. There are many, many, many white children from horrible broken homes and abusive parents, but they don't have an activist community telling them to hate the world because of it.
But what about the skinheads and those guys? Don't they? I was listening.
All right. Forget it. I'm sorry I'm alive.
Let me ask you.
No, I apologize for being alive, because that's where it's leading.
When the skinheads go to the bus stations and meet homeless white children and indoctrinate them to hate blacks, isn't that the same thing as what you're talking about?
Did I make a speech in favor of skinheads?
No, but I'm just saying. But what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to.
When is the last time you saw a skinhead in a court case similar to Tawana Brawley? When is the last? Wait, ease up.
No.
When is the last time you saw a skinhead lead a demonstration and close down the Brooklyn Bridge? You are pointing to what is a clear aberration, where when I make reference to radical activism, it is not, unfortunately, an aberration. It is a standard way of life in New York City and many other cities.
Yeah, okay.
It's unfortunate,
too. Can I bring up a case? You brought up a case. Can I bring one up? I don't think that white folks have to get out in the streets and stop traffic, because take the St. John's brothers. When they raped that young lady, they got off. When the guys in Glen Ridge raped the sick girl, whites have no reason to get in the streets, because for the most part, they're not being judged by the same standards as blacks are. And you can go all through history, and you can see that there's a different judgment if it's a white male versus a black male. And you yourself have to say that.
No, I won't say it. I'll say it's just the opposite. I think if the Glen Ridge girl had been black, those guys would have been locked up for 50 years.
Well, why weren't the St. John's guys locked up then? She was black.
Because they were innocent.
Oh, so...
Why wasn't Limerick Nelson locked up?
I don't know.
Now, that you don't know.
But I'm going to tell you something.
That you don't know.
If he was guilty, I swear to God, if he's guilty, he should go to jail, and anybody who's guilty should go to jail. I don't think because somebody's black, they should escape punishment.
You know that?
I don't believe that.
I believe you, and I think you're a person of goodwill.
But I still think that... I got one great story, going to take 30 seconds. I heard a guy say today on TV, and this is documented, that he's a white superintendent, and the owner of his building said that he wanted him to go in this black guy's apartment and rip the rug up so he could sue the guy, so he can kick him out the apartment. And when he tried to turn him in, he called the mayor of Milwaukee, and the mayor of Milwaukee said, "How dare you turn a white man in like that, you traitor." and this is true. Can you believe that? The mayor of Milwaukee. And
it's obviously disgraceful. Listen to me. Listen. Oh, forget it. I can't. Make your closing statement.
Okay, my closing statement is that the only way that there's going to be justice and peace is if there's justice and peace for everybody. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, but if somebody comes along and hypnotizes you into thinking that 2 and 2 is 5.5, then maybe somebody can come and hypnotize you that justice is that right is wrong and bad is good.
Because you can't sleep at night and have peace if you don't believe in yourself more than you believe in anyone else but God.
All right, let me ask you something. What would make you happy? What changes in society would satisfy you? What would you consider to be peace?
Peace?
Yeah.
Is everybody being judged by the same laws and everybody receiving the same punishments for the injustice that they put on other people. That's peace to me. Peace is everybody have the same opportunity. And if you don't work for it, you don't get it, but I think everybody should have the same opportunity.
But wait a minute. But that's not true because you carry your own prejudices in interpreting the data, Thomas. I'll prove it to you.
Okay, go ahead. I'm listening.
You are making the cavalier assumption that the young men in St. John's got off because somehow the victim was black and the jury was not sympathetic to her. You don't believe that was justice. So what would you ever believe? How could we ever convince you that anything was justice where white men got off on the sexual abuse of a black woman?
Because I'm making my judgment.
100 times out of 100 times, if that case were presented in front of you, you know that you would be suspicious of the outcome. Well, and you know something? I might be too.
Well, I have to say, and that when something happens and it's racial, I have to think twice.
Right.
Because wait a minute, but I know that. But because I know I have to think twice, I do. I know you have to think things through as much as you need to, and you have to bounce things off the wall and talk to other people. And the judgment I make in the St. John's case is based on the evidence that I read after the trial.
You know something?
What?
I might not agree with you with respect to that case, but I really do respect you for what you said just now. Knowing that you harbor a possible prejudice, you're willing to question yourself.
But one thing, Jay, I don't want to call it, I'm going to say, you can call it a bias, whatever, but
yeah.
I have to think about my own personal experience and the experience of my people in this country. And by those two things, I know that injustice is highly likable. You understand?
Well,
I can't say it's always going to be,
right.
Excuse me,
That's all right, it's all right.
But I'm just saying, I know that injustice could happen and does happen, but I also know that sometimes, so I know sometimes guilty people get off, and that's true, and I don't like to see that.
All right. Let me run along. I'm not knocking you off, but I'm late. Thank you. Call me back.
Okay.
I enjoyed talking with you.
All right, bye-bye.
I do think it was productive.
Okay, thank you.
Talk to you soon. There was something in the Wall Street Journal. I had to tell you about it. And I almost forgot in all the excitement of our hijinks. You won't find it listed in want ads or career advice books, but according to a federal appeals court, a person can make a decent living stealing chainsaws. The appeals court in Chicago ruled last week that a Peoria, Illinois man was not eligible for government disability income because he had been gainfully employed as a thief. The man, Harold Dotson, claimed to be disabled by asthma, allergies, and drug abuse, but he admitted at a hearing that he often pilfered chainsaws and then sold them to small businesses. That earned Mr. Dotson over $500 a month, too much, the court said, to allow him on the dole. Though Mr. Dotson's avocation is illegal, it is physically and mentally demanding, just like an ordinary job. Judge Albert Engel said in the opinion, lifting and carrying the chainsaws is significant physical activity, he said, quoting an administrative law judge who previously ruled in the case. The planning and execution of the larceny entails significant mental activity, but the court made clear that not just any illicit work constitutes significant employment. Acting as a lookout at a drug house might constitute a gainful yet insubstantial activity, Judge Engel wrote. whereas someone who chronically engages in acts of vandalism may be substantially but not gainfully employed. The ruling may be a double whammy for Mr. Dotson. Not only will he get no benefits, but he may have put the police on his trail. Law enforcement officials haven't yet come after him, but there's obviously a risk, says Thomas Henry, his lawyer. The transcripts are public now. Lynn Schiller, a spokeswoman for the Social Security Administration, says such cases as Mr. Dotson's are rare because applicants for benefits generally do not disclose criminal acts. Certainly, if income from criminal activity comes to our attention, then we'd pursue it, she says, but we wouldn't have any way of knowing about it in most cases. Legal specialists say the decision is consistent with the government's ordinary stance on income from illegal activity, such as the Internal Revenue Service's position that such earnings are taxable. I don't think it's wrong to say that this is a substantial gainful activity, says Gregory Maggs, a law professor at George Washington University. But, he says, I think they ought to report this guy to the chainsaw dealers in town. Back to the phones now. We have Andrew waiting. Let me give the phone numbers, and you can call about anything that pleases you, or even displeases you, which often makes for more contentious discussion, probably better listening. From Jersey or anywhere else, 201-489-WABC, which is 9222. From Connecticut and New York and anywhere else, 212-563-9222. Actually, if you're calling 212-563-9222 and it's busy, you might try the Jersey number, 201-489-9222, and sneak in that way. It's dirt cheap this time of night. Andrew, we're back with you.
Yes, my point is this, Jay, is that 98% of the blacks and Hispanics in this city are decent and hardworking, and in some cases very conservative as regards their social and moral beliefs. But the problem I see is this: many of them go into the voting booth and they vote for the party line which over the past 30 odd years has proven detrimental to their quality of life. I hope with Giuliani's election, this will be the beginning of the end of big city liberalism. It's as you said last night, one party rule in this city has basically led to corruption and you know, it's basically where the politicians basically, they don't give a damn. They keep electing the same guys year after year after year, and you know, nothing happens. But I think with Giuliani being elected, it will in effect be the death knell for guys like.
I'll tell you something. It's interesting what you say. I can understand, Andrew, and I'm trying to be as blunt as I can and as honest as I know how. I think that if David Dinkins, if there were no racial aspect at all, he would lose by 70 to 30%. And I can't really blame black voters for tending to want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I suppose if there were a guy running who looked exactly like I looked and talked like me or felt like me or made that emotional pitch to me, I might respond to my personal chauvinism and vote for him. But I think the test in this election will be to ask themselves, what in fact is in my best interest, in the best interest of my family? What way of life am I betting on? Am I betting on the libertine, lax social policies of David Dinkins and the Democratic Party, the permanent government of New York City? Or am I better off with the more traditional approach of Mr. Giuliani and what he might represent if in City Hall? And I think that most people, regardless of their color or racial orientation, deep down in their hearts will understand that their own best interests and the best interests of their families reside with a more traditional approach to life. I don't think this is not about race at all, but it's about the way you view life, the way you view yourself in the world, and where your values are. And I know for a fact that it will be difficult. And I don't blame a lot of people who are black for wanting to vote for David Dinkins. I do think that's natural. But I think if you test yourself and you say, which of these two men really reflects the way I feel about life and about myself and about my children and about my family and about the institutions in New York and the way they are crumbling in front of my eyes, which of these two men more closely parallels my own views? And I think that most people, regardless of their color, will vote for the traditional way of life over the more libertine, lax social policies of David Dinkins.
I agree, and that's why I think so many, at least a few of the Democrat politicians, the real, party line hardliners, oppose Dinkins. You see, oppose Giuliani. You see, with Giuliani being elected, that, in a sense, that will be the wake-up call, or I think the death knell for guys like Rangel. Or I watched a documentary a few days ago where they were like indicting Nixon, and I saw Charlie Rangel, and I said, this probably was. I said that the man is still there, Charlie Rangel and Nixon. Watergate hearings, and I saw these guys. I say, wait, I know Rangel, I know this guy. I saw him. He's gained about 50 to 100 pounds, but he's the same guy. And these guys are still around, and I think that, that has to come to an end, where guys can stay there forever. Pete King from Nassau Congress.
Well, it would be good for this in this respect as well. And this is why it's a good thing that Roy Innes is participating in the Democrat primary, Andrew, because it would give people a chance to see that the black community is not monolithic radical left. And it would, if the Democrat Party is defeated for City Hall in November, Andrew, it will open the doors to a new generation of more traditional black politicians and leaders to come to the fore, which I think is important. Don't forget, the reason why in New York City most black politicians tend to be radical left-wingers is because all politicians in New York City, it being a one-party system, tend to be to the left.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, if we open the two-party system here, we'll get more of a balance, black and white. And it would be a great day if people could vote their own values instead of voting race. And that will happen. That day will be hastened. Let's say, I got news for you. Nothing would please me more than if the Republican Party someday nominates a conservative, a tradition. I don't like that word conservative.